Hello, I'm Philip Bluestein, and I am an estate planning attorney. I'm here today as part of our interview series with a colleague of mine, Ray Smith. Ray is an expert in long-term care insurance. He's an independent insurance broker, and he focuses exclusively on long-term care insurance. Ray, welcome, and can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you, Phil, and I'm very happy to be here today. Yes, I have been in the insurance business for quite a while, long-term care only since the year 2000. And that's all I do now. I came up through life insurance and disability and those kinds of things, but I don't do that anymore. The only thing I do is long-term care. And being independent means I have access to a large number of insurance companies, which lets me match whatever the best solution is for a particular client. That's what I do. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Can you tell us exactly what long-term care insurance is?
Yes, Phil, and that's a good question because most people don't know. The best way I can answer your question, however, is to start by telling you what long-term care is not. Let's say that you go skiing, and here in Colorado, that's commonplace. Unfortunately, you have a bad fall and you break your leg. The first thing that's going to happen is you'll be brought to the emergency room where you'll be stabilized. Orthopedic surgeon will be brought in, set the bones, put you in a cast. You'll go through a relatively short period of rehab, and you'll be good to go, hopefully with no residual effects, and everything is fine. You're back enjoying your life. Now, everything that's happened so far is not long-term care and would not be covered by long-term care insurance. However, it would be covered by your medical insurance because this is a medical situation. Let me change the scenario a little bit. Instead of a broken leg, you suffer a stroke. Well, you're brought to the same emergency room, you're stabilized as before, but now you go through a lengthy period of rehab. At some point in time, your doctor is going to turn to you and say, Phil, when you first came in here, you could hardly speak, you couldn't move, you've made remarkable progress. But you're now as good as you're ever going to be, and you're only at 60% of where you were before the stroke. That means that for an extended period of time, you're going to need help with bathing and dressing and eating and some other things. All of that is what long-term care is. Long-term care services is the sort of the spectrum of services that help you get through the day. Sometimes it happens at home. Actually, most often, long-term care is provided at home, but also adult daycare, assisted living, and nursing home.
Ray, as you know, I'm an estate planning attorney, so I'm intrigued by long-term care insurance. Can you talk to us a little bit about how long-term care insurance can fit into a person's estate plan?
Sure. Happy to do that. Phil, let me say that a plan to pay for long-term care when care is needed is not an estate plan. It's also not a financial plan. But an estate plan or a financial plan that does not address the question of how are you going to pay for long-term care services when you need them is not a complete estate plan, nor is it a complete financial plan. Why is this important to estate planning? Well, long-term care for one person can easily cost $1 million, $1.5 million, depending on how far into the future we're talking about, meaning how young they are, because of inflation. For a couple, long-term care can easily cost $2 million, $3 million. That's $2 or $3 million that you haven't accounted for in your estate plan unless you have done just that, unless you incorporated as part of the larger estate plan how you're going to pay for care when it's needed, where the money is going to come from. There's no doubt that the money will be there if the net worth is high enough, but will it come from where it should come from, or will it be an ad hoc thing that diminishes the overall value of the planning that you've done?
So what are some of the different ways that people pay for long-term care insurance?
Phil, there are only three ways of paying for long-term care services. One, you could pay out of your net worth, out of your assets. Usually that means there was no plan in place and it just sort of, the crisis happens and the money comes from somewhere, which may not be good for the overall estate plan. So number one, you pay for it out of your assets. Number two, you could qualify for Medicaid. Now, Medicaid, you have to spend down assets, or more accurately, you cannot have too much in the way of assets, and the current number is somewhere around $114,000 combined for a couple. Now, there are a few exclusions, but you really can't, if you start with several $1,000,000 worth of net worth, you're going to have to spend down to qualify for Medicaid. For people who have a choice, that is, people who are not poor, Medicaid is not a good answer. Medicaid is heavily biased towards nursing home, which means that if you do qualify for Medicaid, you're going to spend your remaining time in a nursing home, not where most people want to be. The third way of paying for care is long-term care insurance. Now that is a very simple risk shifting device. You shift the risk of needing long-term care services from your shoulders onto those of an insurance company. So we have three ways of paying for care. Number one, you could pay for it with your own assets. Number two, you could eventually qualify for Medicaid. I'm not sure you want to do that, but you could. And number three, you offload the risk by using long-term care insurance.
So, extrapolating from what you've said here, from an estate planning standpoint, it would seem to me that what this would allow, having a long-term care insurance policy in place, would allow you to preserve those assets that you already have. You don't have to worry about spending them down now, and you don't have to be as concerned about where those things are going to go. Then you can make that part of your comprehensive estate plan. You may be putting your assets into a trust, or you might be putting assets into other types of things, or distributing them to your children, or various things like that. But all that, having that long-term care insurance tool gives you some flexibility and allows you to control where your assets are going to go much better.
Precisely. By having long-term care insurance, you remove the uncertainty of, am I going to have to earmark $1 or $2 or $3 million worth of my assets for long-term care? You take that off the table, and you can then plan a much better use, a much better disposition, better in terms of what you want, by not having to worry about long-term care. It's covered.
How much net worth is needed by an individual or a couple to self-insure as opposed to using long-term care insurance?
Phil, perhaps a better question might be how much liquid net worth is necessary. So, for example, if somebody has $20 million worth of raw land, that's not likely to be terribly useful when long-term care is needed, because you have to convert some of that acreage into cash. And as we know, raw land is not terribly liquid, and or any other asset that may not be very liquid. So if we're talking about liquid net worth, if you have, for a single person, $1 million, $1.5 million of liquid net worth, you could self-insure with that. And for a couple, I would say $2.5, $3 million of liquid net worth. Now, you could self-insure. That is, you would have enough to cover the cost of care in almost every case. But just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should. I would argue that it doesn't make good business sense to use your own assets to pay for care when you could offload that risk and that liability to an insurance company, and then you have your $3 million if you're a couple that you can better deploy in your estate plan.
It occurs to me, Ray, too, in this conversation that we're having, that a person, they can get long-term health insurance, long-term care insurance, and but that's not going to limit them of what they can spend from their own assets. So they could have a very good insurance policy, but they could still supplement from what they already have in their assets. So it's not going to prohibit them from doing that, unlike that what we talked about earlier, that Medicaid example where their assets are probably gone. Even if a lot of people, you may have heard, a lot of people will take things and they'll spend on their assets, or they'll try to put them in a trust or something like that, or distribute them to other family members so they don't have those assets. And then now they're gone and they're relying on the charity of their kids who may have their assets now, or their assets just may be gone.
Yeah.
So they could have their insurance, and then they could still improve their lifestyle even more beyond what the insurance may provide. Well, it sounds like a lot of the things you're talking about are a lot of the same questions that we're asking our clients when we're doing an estate plan. Well, what do you want your later years to look like? And it also sounds like obviously it's not that situation where you're looking at, okay, an elderly person or the children of an elderly person are looking at, oh well, we better hurry up. Looks like mom's going to be hospitalized, or mom was just hospitalized. Now let's get long-term care insurance. Just like we probably don't want to be getting that estate plan and trying to get that estate plan in place when somebody is in the hospital and we're concerned that, gosh, we really need this now because this might be the final time.
You're right. It's the same concept.
Ray, as an estate planning attorney, I deal with people at all age ranges, and of course our philosophy, and I firmly believe it's the right philosophy. Everybody should have an estate plan. In fact, everybody does have an estate plan, whether they've drafted it themselves, whether they've gone to an attorney, or whether they're just leaving it up to, in this case, the state of Colorado. So anybody who comes to me will be talking about, okay, well, what do you need, and we'll figure out where they are in their life and what kind of estate plan that they need, from earlier ages to very late. Is there a time when people should start considering long-term care insurance, or is there a time where they're too young? Obviously, we talked about it might be too late if they've already have a very serious illness. They might not qualify. But is there a time when they're too young?
Phil, most of my clients were between about age 50 and 65 at the time that they purchased long-term care insurance. Now, some were younger and some were older, but the majority were in that age 50 to 65. Having said that, and here comes a smart aleck answer, but it's true. The best time to buy long-term care insurance is today, not tomorrow, and here's why. Because tomorrow you may have gone to your doctor and you come out with a diagnosis that either makes you uninsurable or causes your premium to be higher because you're with this diagnosis, you're now not as healthy as you were the day before, or at least in the eyes of the insurance company. Number one. Number two, each year that you wait, it's going to cost more because one of the factors that determines the cost of long-term care insurance is your age at the time that you apply. So if you're age 40 and you could have bought the policy today, but you're going to wait 10 years until you're 50, it's going to be a lot more expensive, and it may not even be attainable anymore because people generally don't become more healthy as they age, they become less healthy.
Well, thank you very much, Ray. I hope that our viewers of this interview are finding this helpful for their planning needs, whether it's estate planning or long-term care insurance, and they can see how this can be an important part of their estate planning needs, and certainly how estate planning, if they're planning for their long-term care insurance, and their long-term care, certainly estate planning is a very important part of that plan as well. So if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me about estate planning questions or other legal issues that you may have. Again, my name is Phil Bluestein with the Bluestein Law Firm. Our phone number is 720-420-1777. And we're here again with Ray Smith, long-term care specialist. And his phone number is 303-699-4172. Thank you very much.
Phil, thank you for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to speak to somebody knowledgeable like yourself about the intersection of long-term care planning with estate planning.